Hi, folks. We're with Tacitus today. Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this radio audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about what must we do to ensure that political office holders in the West believe they are representing the people of the West, their voters and the interests of the nation that they're supposedly a political representative of. Do we need to insist they're locally born? Do we need to insist that, for example, do we need to insist they're locally born, or that their parents were also, what do we need to do here? Is it even possible to ensure this? For example, in Britain, Tony Blair and David Cameron both were eagerly selling out the British public and British interests and the interests of the local populace, and they were as British as they come. So does local heritage make any difference in reality? Once people are captured by the globalist machine, does that mean they're corrupted forever and they cease to act in the interests of the public that they supposedly represent, and instead act in the interests of the globalist cabal that own them and control them and direct them? So let's just have a look at this in its wider issue. Now in the United States, to run for the office of President of the United States, you need to be American born. You need to be born in the United States. Now, this sort of has a different meaning really today, because when that was framed, the born in the United States, for the office of president, that was a different time. You couldn't just catch a plane and fly in as a pregnant woman from the middle of Africa or wherever, quickly pump out a baby and then jump back on the plane and head back to Africa. And they go, oh yeah, he's American born, that's it. There was an Australian guy who was, he's a former colleague actually, and he worked for a multinational company, and he had to go to America for 1 year as part of his sort of executive education, if you like. And his wife was just determined she was pregnant when this came through. So the child was born in the US and therefore is a United States citizen, even though he was only there for a year, doesn't want to live in America or anything like that. The kid's still considered an American citizen, which is interesting. But having a look at this idea of the amount of politicians today in the West, and we get them in Australia too, Indian politicians, and their first loyalty is to India. Islamic politicians, their first loyalty is to Islam and Islamic nations. African politicians, their first loyalty is to Africa. And more important, not only do they have those first loyalties, they don't see that they have any loyalty or should have any loyalty. Why should I have loyalty to this white country that's taken me in as a refugee or an immigrant? Because they're all white oppressors and slavers and Nazis and yada yada. So we've got a lot of politicians here in Australia that are openly and blatantly, and across the West generally, openly and blatantly hostile to our society and to all its values and all the core social assumptions that were built up over many hundreds, if not thousands of years. The people coming to Australia, in the very first instance, and the people coming to Australia were all white Christians, and so the culture of Australia was built up around a white Christian society as they came to Australia. And now it didn't mean they were all just English. They were mixed there with the Scottish and Irish and Welsh and Irish activists and even other white people from other places, coming here, but from Europe and so on. But it was all white and all Christian, and so the values of the country grew up around that. Now, so when you insert people from very different cultures with very different attitudes and very tribal, then the Indian politicians blatantly, for example, that get elected, they whether they were born here or they came as children, or even they came recently, they've got really thick accents. They get elected through dirty deals with the party machinery of the big political parties, and they're blatantly partisan about they want handouts for the Indian community. The Chinese politicians want handouts for the Chinese community, and so on. So they see themselves as representatives of their genetic community, not as representatives of the Australian people or to better the lives of the people in the nation. Far from it. They're pleading special interest for their racial group. So how far back do you have to go? So does it make a difference if those people are born, these imported people from the third world? Does it make any difference if they're born in Australia? Well, not really. Now, if you look at Indians, say Indians in Fiji, 5 or 6 generations down the track after they came to Fiji from India, they still perceive they represent the Indian community and the interests of the Indian community, and they want handouts for the Indian community. They see that first and foremost that's the diaspora that they represent. The fact there are other people around who are like, hey, we don't care. We represent the Indians. So with some communities, I don't know how far back you have to go to achieve people to get to a point where people perceive I'm local, I'm British, or Australian, or wherever, American. I'm a local, and I represent everyone in this nation. I don't know if it's even possible to achieve that with non-white people. It's interesting when you look at, say, the British, when they had government of, the British Empire, that sort of stuff, when they had government over other countries, and how they would view the common good. They would view it quite differently. They would say, well, that road or that bridge or that dam, or if we increase crop production, there'll be fewer people starving. If we have a road here, then those peasant farmers will be able to bring their produce to the markets, or that bridge will mean that instead of taking 2 days to get from here to there, they can do it in 6 hours or something. They would view very much those things, and they would look at taxation not on the basis of what can we extract out of these people, but not that didn't happen, it did. But they would be, if you listen or read rather the writings of the governors or the administration officials, they would constantly be making reference to, well, the peasants can't really afford that, or it was quite a bad crop last year, or there was lots of storms last year, and there's less wheat being produced. So we really should scale back on the taxation to try and help these people, or this or that, or we should move food surplus from here to there to help. There was a lot of that. So the British, whilst not perfect, and there's arguments, well, they shouldn't have been there anyway, but there was very much a focus on how do we make the lives of the people better, whether they be peasants, Indian peasants, African peasants, or so on. That was, and it wasn't perfect, nor was it universal, nor was it all the time, but it was there. It was a permanent fixture of the attitudes and thinking of the people. Now you could say, well, that's kind of Christian conscience stuff, or it's public service working to deliver for the public good. You can say those things, and those sentiments did exist too. But it was, but in reverse, you don't see that. The people coming to the third world, that come to the first world, they are not fucking thinking of the common good. Quite far from it. They're thinking of how much stuff they can put in their pockets, and how many laws they can break, and how many people they can bribe and corrupt. It's quite a different attitude, quite different. And we need to understand that and accept that's how it is. We won't like it. It may be unpleasant. It may be unpalatable to think about, but that's how it is. Now, are there exceptions? Of course there are. Of course there are exceptions. There are people that very much embrace the new country they've come to and want to deliver in the common. Of course there are. There's just not very many of them. In fact, it's rare. So we need to accept that. Now, I don't know how many generations you can go back. And again, just reiterating, Tony Blair and David Cameron in Britain were more than happy to sell out the British public, more than happy to the globalists. So just because you're white and Christian and you can trace your family tree back hundreds and whatever of years, it doesn't guarantee that you're going to represent the country or be committed to its well-being or the welfare of the populace. It doesn't guarantee that at all. People can still be corrupted. Now, just coming to, there's a difference between somewhere like Britain, which is not a nation of immigrants, to somewhere like, say, Australia or the New World countries like the United States, Canada, and Australia, New Zealand, and so on, where migration was the primary source of population growth, and where there were Stone Age people that were already there. You know, that sort of thing. Can you actually go back? You know, how many generations can you go back in these New World countries? That's a different matter. Going to Europe, which has got a long lineage, should you need to trace your family tree or your genetic heritage back multiple generations? Look, I think so. I've been looking at this for a while and noticed that Indians don't assimilate. They hang around in their own group. They're happy to take from white people as much as they can, but in every other respect, they hang around with their own genetic diaspora. They send back to India, even the village of their ancestors, for fuck's sake, for husbands and brides. They keep the genetic and the cultural thing very pure and very current and very up to date. It's very, very important to them. And every year, sometimes more than once a year, they go back to the village of their ancestors to swan around, what big, heavyweight people they are. Look, we went to the white country and look how well we're doing here. And we're putting those white people in their place and all this sort of shit. So I don't know if they'll ever integrate. And now you can make laws to integrate. So if you come to the West, you have to have a Western name, or you can't send back to the village of their ancestors. You're welcome to go to India to get married if you want to, but then it's 10 years or 15 years before you can come back to the West. Do things like that to make it so. If you want to come to the West, fine, but you must integrate. This is not an option. You must integrate. Now, it doesn't mean you can't open up an Indian restaurant. You're welcome to do that, but you must integrate into society. You must marry a local person and that sort of thing. Maybe give them a tax break for procreating with someone who's not brown. I don't know, but looking, really have a task force to look at how do we make these people integrate, assuming they want to come to the West. If you don't want to integrate, then don't come. But if you want to come to the West, then you need to integrate, and there need to be measures done to do that. Absent of that, I don't think Indians will ever integrate into the white West or the Christian West. I just don't think it'll ever happen. Even the Christian ones don't. I'm looking at the amount of Christian Indians that and you can tell with they've got Portuguese names like De Souza and that sort of thing. So even they don't integrate at high numbers. They do at much higher numbers than, say, the Hindu or something, but it's still quite low in the overall scheme of things. And if, say, you look at someone like Nikki Haley in the United States, Nimarata, her name is, Nikki was a little pet name meaning child. So she uses that to sort of try and westernize herself. But even her, her views are that America is a pretty bad place. It's a racist bad place, and it has to be, only mass migration is going to solve things. So she's not doesn't represent America or the good of America. Far from it, in my opinion. And yet she's benefiting. Her parents came. She's married a white guy, even though her children seem browner than she is. I don't know how that works, but she all she does is rail about racism she suffered as a kid. Yet she was shoehorned into goodness knows how many women's associations, and parents were given some easy, juicy breaks with a business that suspiciously successful the minute it started. And, she's been job at the United Nations. She's been gifted the job of governor of Carolina or South Carolina twice, in 2 terms. She's a very, very privileged woman and very wealthy. So this idea that she rails about racism and so on is utter bullshit. But she's acting, in my view, directly contrary to the interests of the populace of the United States. Now, was she born in the US or did she come over as a child? She might have been born, but nonetheless, she represents sort of semi-integrated Indians who still are against the local country that they've come to. Now, in terms of devout Muslims, particularly the activists, but the devout Muslims, they similarly don't integrate. So you're looking at people who get elected to political office, say a local mayor or something like that, or even people that commit various terrorist acts, or they're firebrands in the local mosque, and their grandparents came, like Pakistan or something, their grandparents came, so they're two generations local born, but they only marry other people from Pakistan, they only marry other Muslims, they only so their activism and their racial genetic purity thing and cultural purity, it's kept very much alive, and very much a set of sort of jangling, agonized nerves and the like. So they're not integrating. So even 2 generations on, 3 generations on, the Islamic people are not integrating. Now, and whether they come from the Middle East or Lebanon or it doesn't matter, Pakistan, they're not integrating. Now, say Lebanese Christians, even there the integration rate isn't high. They still send back to the village for brides and husbands still. Now, some of them will marry local people, but they'll only marry local Lebanese. They don't marry into, outside of their own diaspora. So even they don't see themselves as, universally as citizens. So we really need to think about this. Now, should political office be denied to recent migrants or people who are brown or black or whatever? I mean, you look in the United States, the people who can trace their heritage, the United States heritage, back 400 years, or people who came, black people who came to the United States after slavery had ended, that sort of thing, they still see themselves as representing the black diaspora. They still see themselves as entitled to take whatever they can stuff into their pockets. They still see that they're fighting back against evil white Hitler racism and so on, and still see that they're fighting the Black Panther good fight and this sort of thing. So they don't see themselves as representing the people. They don't see themselves as holding public office to represent it. They just don't perceive it that way. So we really need to look at this. How do we sort of only vote for people who are prepared to act and behave responsibly? Do we limit the vote to achieve that? Do we have other controls? Do we prevent? Now, if people from foreign-born people are prevented from holding political office, or even it's really the cutoff point generally seems to be great-grandparents. So if your great-grandparents were, for example, British-born, then you can be entitled to hold political office. That would cut out a lot of it. And then the next thing would be to insist on assimilation integration. So Indians cannot come over, or Pakistanis, Islamic people generally cannot come over and then send back to the village of their ancestors for brides and husbands. That's got to stop. But so the chain of non-assimilation has to be broken if we're going to make this work. We have to really treat this now as a very serious issue. I think it'd be wrong to say, well, look, only white Christians can hold political office. It would be an understandable response to what's going on. It just doesn't, like the morals of it look a bit icky. So we really need to start looking at it along. If your great grandparents weren't born in the country, then should you hold political office? Now, in the case of countries built on migration, such as Australia, such as the United States, then other considerations need to be put in place. But unless you're committed to the public good, as in all the public, then and demonstrably and clearly so, then political office, I think, should be denied. Now, to some extent, there are certain electoral districts in Australia, for example. You get the same in, say, the United States, where there are so many, I don't know, Indians there that an Indian candidate is pretty much likely to win because the Indians vote tribally. Now that alone is a problem. If you import people en masse, which Australia is doing, that are prepared to vote tribally and look out only for the interests of their own diaspora, you've already got a major problem because they will not act in the public good, and they're quite open about that. So should in those areas they only get access to, or can only vote for, white Christian candidates, should that happen. Now it's a big subject, and one where I don't think there's any easy answers, but one where it's a debate that we have to have, because this is one of the biggest threats to democracy, as in representative democracy that we have at the moment. Putting aside the intentions of the globalists for a moment, we have to consider this, that unless you sit in office for the common good, you're no fucking good to any government. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.